Hello, welcome back to the shop. My name's Jamie. Today we're going to be doing a couple of things. I have a project coming up where I need to have some internal metric threads on a very specific part that I'm making. Whenever I'm doing internal threads like that, I'd like to have a external thread that I can easily thread into that piece as I'm cutting it so I can test to make sure that I have the right threads. So I made this part. This is a 50 millimeter diameter, 1.5 millimeter pitch thread. And with my machine, that involves changing the change gears as well as understanding how to move the carriage back and forth without losing the gearing and the thread pitch in relation to your cutting tool. So today we're going to go through those two things. Setting up the change gears and the backlash, and then also how to go through and cut metric threads on an Imperial lead screw. Hope it's helpful for you. If it is, consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get to it. So let's talk about metric threads for a minute. Let's talk about change gears. And using my lathe here, so if you have a similar machine, this is a Jet 1336. This is an Imperial lead screw, but it does have the ability to cut metric pitches. And so this chart right here is where I'm looking to see I need to cut 1.5 threads. So in this bottom left-hand corner, I have a 1.5. That tells me that I need to have my lever on C1. And also this, because it's bottom left-hand side, this little diagram up here says if you're bottom left-hand side, these are the gears that you'd like. And if you're in the top right, these are the gears that you would use. So in my case, I need a 1.5. I need to have a 40 tooth connected to my 127, and then the 120 connected to the 40. On my machine, that looks like this. This here is my 40 tooth gear. This is my 127. This is connected to the 120, and you can see I have the 20 connected to the 40 here. So this machine right now is set up to cut the metric gears. This is funny. So I'm showing you how to swap this back to Imperial, and as I'm doing so, I'm realizing that I need to keep it in the original thread gear ratio that I had it, because I still have more threads to cut. I need to cut all of those internal threads that I talked about. So good news is we're just going to continue this with the setting it up for the metric threads, and that way you'll get a sense of the backlash. But to swap these gears out, it's as simple as undoing this set bolt, this nut here. You can take the gear off, spin it around, pop it back on. Same thing with this one up here. You've got a couple of gears here. If it calls for that, you can use that. In my case, the only swap that I have to do is this gear here down on the bottom. So what I need to have is, again, the 40 tooth gear hitting the 127, and then the 120 gear hitting the 40. So I'm going to pop this gear on. Get that keyway lined up with the key. All right, and then slide him out of the way. So let's get that gear on first. I'm looking at it. So I'm looking at it this way to make sure that I have the gears lined up. If I currently have two spacers right here, if I only had one, this gear would be a little bit too inboard, and it would almost bump into that 127 in the back, and we definitely don't want that. So this looks pretty good right here. And I'll just get that bolted back on. so this is just snug here for now. We can tighten it up ever so slightly more when it's bound into the gears. Again, it feels good that it's lined up nicely with that 120. Coming back to this side, so there's two gears that need the backlash set. The 120 into the 40 here, and then the 127 up with the 40 on the top. And again, there's two ways to do that. So let's do this one first. So I'm going to walk this one over. And what I have found is that you want to keep the gear away from, let me see if I can get you in nice and close. So what I like to do is have the gear if I have it in nice and tight like this right now, when I lock this in, it's just going to make that even worse. So I'm going to back that off just a little bit. And then as I tighten that in, you can see, okay, but that is way too much backlash, so I don't want that much. Loosen that up. Let's walk this in. And now tighten this up. So I've got a little bit of backlash there. That's pretty good. If I were to say anything, that's maybe a whisker tight, but I can get some movement back and forth. I would say that's good. And with this nut now tight, I can rock using, make sure that you can see that. Oh, you can. Okay. Yep. So now I want to adjust the backlash up here. So I'm going to rock the whole mechanism up. Get that lined up. And I'm going to bring it down just a whisker. Tighten this up. And then see how that looks up there. So I'm really not getting, okay, there it is. So you can see it now. Getting a little bit of backlash in there. That looks pretty good. And then all that's left is to tighten this guy up. Okay. All right, and I should say, you should do all of this work with the power off and disconnected from the wall. Should have started with that. So let me reach under here. Plug this guy back in. Okay. All right, so I've tightened this. I've tightened this. My gear, let's just give that a little bit. Yep, that's just fine. This is tight. These backlashes look good. All right, let's start it. All right, there we go. Easy enough to change those gears. No pun intended. Setting the backlash on these when you when you're finalizing your setup is important. You want to have just a little bit of movement in there. You know what? There's a specification for this. I don't have that spec. I'm just kind of going based on some experience with mechanical things. You don't want these so tight that they're bound up, and you don't want them so loose that they make a ton of noise. So I've got a slight bit of movement here, which is working out nicely, and just a little bit of movement up there. All right, so with your gears set up for metric cutting, you can go ahead and start your thread cutting operations. As I mentioned before, one of the challenges with metric threads is you don't have the ability to disengage and engage the lock nut as you're cutting the threads. You need to leave it engaged. So a couple of things that are really important for me is the work that you're doing. Make sure that you leave some adequate thread clearance so that as you're winding down the motor, there's enough time for the carriage to slow down and stop before it crashes into your chuck. The other thing is go as slow as you're comfortable, which was me with my machine is again as slow as it'll go. And I like to try to get into a bit of a rhythm so that I can go through, make my cut, shut down the engine, back off the carriage, drive the carriage out, walk the carriage in, change my depth of cut, drive it in, back the carriage out, drive the carriage out, walk the carriage in, set my depth of cut, and repeat. And that process, allows you to get in a rhythm and less likely to make mistakes that way. Working so close to the chuck is always, hair-raising for people, so myself primarily. So to help me do that, to walk through that process, I have 2 dial indicators set up. I'll show you what those look like. So I have these 2 dial indicators set up. This one in the back is on the carriage. So as I'm walking the carriage out, after I've gone through the threads, I can walk it back, and then I'm going to drive the carriage back with the motor, and then I can, with the hand wheel, walk the carriage back into 0 here. And that always ensures that I'm starting at the same place. What this dial indicator does is this measures my depth of cut, and I'm using the compound for that. So these 2 work in conjunction as I am driving it in and driving it out. But all this talk is probably getting boring. Let's get right to it and do some cutting. There's a couple of steps that I've done ahead of time. One is for my workpiece. I've already established the major diameter of the area where I'll be cutting the threads. I've also cut the relief area after the threads that will give the carriage time to slow down before it crashes into the chuck. First operation, as with any thread cutting, is to do a scratch pass across some bluing so you can check for your proper thread pitch. Once I'm through the thread area, I'll shut down the motor and everything will come to rest. That looks pretty good. Okay, so I've done my scratch pass. That looks good. I've zeroed out the carriage on this indicator here, and I've pushed in, or I've gone in 5 thousandths for the first pass. And the carriage is locked into the threading screw. And so I'll have to use the power on and power off to move the carriage back and forth so I don't lose that position. And I've got it set on the slowest setting. And let's give it a whirl. Back it off. I need to move the carriage backwards before I back it off. That's why I set this up. And so I'm going to run it through again, same depth, and see if I've damaged the cutter. Of course, that's the whole point of moving the carriage in and out, is you walk it in, back it off, move the carriage out, walk it back in again. So, rookie mistake. Good news is, I mean, taking everything slow. Let's see, this does not look like it was damaged at all, but I'm just going to run it through without bringing it in at all and see how it looks. Stop, back off the carriage. You can see this, give me some room, and then walk it back out. All right, I want to come out far enough so that when I re-engage it going in, it picks up any backlash. So now I'm going to bring the carriage back to 0. Then I'm going to push my threading tool in about another 5 thousandths. The total that I'm looking to go in is 27 thousandths. So we're going to go forward and then stop it so it unwinds in the clearance area. Back it off, give myself plenty of room. Now we're going to drive it backwards. All Bring the carriage back in to 0. And then I can bring the threading tool in again. And now we can go forward. Back it off. Back it out. Drive it in to 0. Bring the cutter in. Drive it forward. Back it off. Drive it out. Carriage in, bring the cutter in, drive it forward. Back it off, drive it out. Carriage in. Okay, so I've gone 10, 20, 25, getting very close to my 27.5. So we're just going to come in a little bit here call it 2, and we'll drive that in. You know what, I'm going to continue to drive it out because I just want to test and see how that looks. The part that I'm going to be making will be threading onto this part of the spindle. So these 2 lock nuts here, what I'll be doing during the process is taking off this outer one so that I can test on my piece just how well my test threads are coming out. So I've popped the locking nut off of the back of the spindle, and I'm just going to see how that works. Okay, it's actually going on pretty well. I got a little bit of resistance here. I'm on about halfway. So I'm going to go in just a little bit more and then try it again. But I think we're getting there. All right, so I've brought my cutting bit in about 0.5 thousandths. We're going to run through that twice and test again. All right, so take the lock nut off the back, bring it here. Goes on pretty good. It's a little slippery. Let's just see. This is going on pretty easy. I just think the threads need to be cleaned up just a little bit, but I would say this works really nice. Just a little bit snug, but really not getting that much resistance. I think if we hit it with maybe one more spring pass, I think we'll be good to go. Just going to clean those threads a little bit. All right, another test. Okay, yeah, there we go. Perfect. Very much like the back. I think that is going to be a great test piece. We've got guest star today, Buddy. Buddy, how we doing? But yeah, no, thanks for watching the video. I appreciate all my subscribers. Hope you learned something. Consider giving me a thumbs up if you liked it. If you'd like to see more content like that, consider subscribing. And until next time, thanks for watching. Hey, get it. Can't get good help these days. Bring it here. Bring it here. Bring it. Good boy. Good job, buddy. All right, say hi to the people, buddy. Hello, people. All right, see you later.